Well, thanks everybody for being here, and thank you Blue Sky. When I got the invitation by email, I first thought it was a scam. I'm very glad that it's not. So thank you for extending an invitation, and I'm thrilled to show this work. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Valparaíso in general, what brought me there, and then we're just going to do a simple kind of walkthrough of the pieces. If you have comments, questions throughout, please intervene. I would be happy for this not to be a monologue, so feel free to talk to me at any time. So as mentioned, I'm a self-taught photographer. I've always been quite artistic, but I didn't really find my path. I tried painting, I did ceramics, I did a whole bunch of things, and I wasn't particularly good at any of them. But I kind of had the fiber, so to say. And I went to a high school that was dedicated to the arts because I knew I liked it. And the first time I picked up a camera there, I knew it was for me. I loved it. It felt much more natural. I felt more comfortable with it. And it felt like a cool way to go out and explore the world. So before I knew that street photography was a genre with a history, rules, codes, I just like going out with a camera and photograph outside. So I've continued the practice ever since, and it's brought me to many different places in my life, including Valparaíso. I also come from a family that's moved around like a lot. So I'm originally French, even though you can't hear it. But I can also do the whole talk with a French accent. That's possible. So my parents are French, and they've always traveled. They worked in hotels all over the world, and I was born in the U.S. Thanks to them. And I just got this habit of moving every few years with them, which I've then realized I've continued into adulthood with fairly regular rhythms of like 5 to 6 years, at which point I feel like changing everything and uprooting and going elsewhere. And that's sort of what brought me to Valparaíso. So I moved there in 2016. I was living in New York at that point, and I had been in New York for 6 years. And I was getting, I know New York is a great city, but I was getting a little antsy there. I wanted something new. And I wasn't quite sure what to do, where to go. And my sister moved to Chile with her husband, who's Chilean. And she invited me to come visit them. And so I did, and I stayed 5 years. So don't invite me anywhere. It's a very risky move. So I moved there at the end of 2016. Picked up a camera. I wanted a bit of a break. I wanted to do some photography. And as soon as I started photographing the city, I was, I guess, enamored. I felt like there was something for me there. I loved the images that I was making. I loved walking around there. I didn't speak a word of Spanish. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I felt I had to stay. And with this type of practice, whether you call it street photography, whether you call it something else, I do feel like it's really important to photograph where you live, and not only when you travel, because you get to photograph when you're out buying groceries and you have like a very different relationship to a city. So I felt like just going to Valparaíso once a year, twice a year for a few years wouldn't cut it. So I decided to stay and do something there. And I'm also very close to my family that's there, and so it just ended up being a really important part of my life. But that also means I got a little bit of like the two aspects of going someplace new. I had all of the discovery at first, as you do when you're a tourist, when you're visiting, when you're traveling, and everything is kind of new and exciting. And then I settled in, and I learned Spanish. I had to, and I got to really get to know the place. So I got both aspects of being curious, but also being able to go a little bit further. I think I'll start. I'm going to move around a lot, so I'm going to have you move your chairs all the time. Sorry about that. But I wanted to start with this image here for a few reasons. It's one of my favorite images of Valparaíso, and one of the reasons is that it feels very emblematic of the city. Obviously, there's an echo with the quote that I started the text with. But Valparaíso, I don't know if anybody has been, knows what it looks like. So essentially, it's a city. It's a seaport, so it's right on the Pacific, and it's very hilly. It's made out of 42 hills. It's very steep, so it's all of these hills going like directly into the Pacific. So what that means, it's this little maze of narrow winding streets and steep staircases, and it's a bit of a labyrinth. It's also extremely colorful, as one can tell. But yeah, so this image, it has that labyrinth aspect of the city. And I like that you don't really know what you're looking at. It's both structured because it's very geometric, but it's also very disorienting. And this is actually an image that works in all four directions, which I find quite cool. So there's a little bit of a feeling that you have with these Escher etchings, the stairs that go up and down. So it has that. It has a street art of Valparaíso. It has, you can tell that it's a bit dirty as a city, maybe. So it looks like Valparaíso. And it also, I think it's quite emblematic of what I'm interested in photography. The structure, the light and shadow. I do have a thing for geometry and a little bit abstraction as well. And what I like so much about playing with light and shadow, as you'll see in a lot of these images, is, I photograph very daily scenes, very daily moments. But if you have a right light and you have the right shadows, anything becomes really interesting. So this scene that doesn't have people in it, it doesn't really have, like a moment as you might expect in street photography. Because the light hits a particular way, it suddenly becomes something peculiar. So that is something that's endlessly interesting to me and fascinating. And that makes it actually a moment, because I've never seen the light hit in quite that way any other time. And I've been to this spot a lot. So yeah, a little note about the black and white, and I'm going to anticipate some questions because I always get that one. Why black and white? I've always been drawn to black and white. Maybe it's because of the photographers that I look up to. It's a language that feels natural to me, and it's also a way to create that space that is timeless, not in the sense of, like old looking, but in a lot of these images, there's the aura of Valparaíso, but you're always also not entirely sure when they were taken, where they were taken, and I do like that ambiguity a lot. And I think black and white helps with that. So even though Valparaíso is the jewel of the Pacific, the city of 1,000 colors, it's an actual nickname I've picked too and kind of went with it. So that is for that image. And I like to open with it also because it's quite confusing, so it keeps you on your toes. This image I like to call my image about nothing, because smack at the center of an image there is a column, so that should be the subject of the image. It's also taken in a part of town that's very uninteresting. This is the wall of a mall across from the bus station. So it's a very unappealing part of town. Nothing happens there. But there was something about the light there where I felt there was a photo to be taken. And so I spent months going back to the same spot trying to figure out what to do. And finally I managed to get an image there. And there's not much going on in this image, but because of the shapes and quite a few details that are just kind of magical, like the way this man's jacket is shaped in a perfect triangle is really nice, and it adds to the geometry of that image. And then if you get a little closer, you'll see that the way he walks, his feet are just at the starting and the end of a column. And that's just like a very lucky moment. I couldn't have bet that his stride would be that way. So again, just with a few things, suddenly there's a photograph that appears, and it's the nice thing about kind of street photography, or however else you want to call it, is that no matter where you are in the world, even in a boring part of town in a mall, there's always something to do, always something to see, so you can never get bored with a camera. I chose these images together. I do a lot of like hide and seek, so you'll see that as well a fair amount. This image I've taken, I'm sitting inside a bus and I'm looking out the window. So the panels you see there, they're wooden panels that indicate the direction. And I've been fascinated with buses in Valparaíso for the whole time I lived there. I actually did a separate project on the buses. But if you can picture it, first of all, they're like smaller buses than the ones we're used to here. They call them micro, they're like micro buses. And the buses, essentially the drivers earn more money if they have more people in the buses. So that means they like kind of race each other in the street. They race each other. Sometimes they don't really stop to let you get out. They like slow down and you have to kind of jump out. Or it also happens if at one stop there aren't enough people, they just don't stop. So it's like there's this whole thing, there's a whole informal economy around the buses, like people who sell to the drivers. There's also like people whose job, and again, is informal, so like they get like a little bit of money from the drivers, but they ride the times the buses stop. So they like just stand there and they ride so that they can tell the driver they need to adjust their speed to be competitive. So it's like this very interesting universe, and I've always wanted to photograph in the buses. So this one is one of the first photos that I took in a bus, I think. And then I ended up making a more documentary project in the buses, just trying to figure out what I could do there, and then just talking to different people. And at that time, I didn't speak Spanish, so when I say talking to people, I meant I went with my sister with the baby, and we went to talk to random people in the street, including the guys who like write down the times. And one of them told us that there were a few female bus drivers, so that got me curious. And we ended up kind of tracking one down by like asking around the street if they'd seen a bus driver, like what bus she drove, and then we went to the end of that line, asked, and I ended up meeting this woman called Danae, and then through her I met a few other bus drivers, so I did like a separate project in that. Yeah, that's for buses in Valparaíso. But it was also part of my kind of routine. Again, if you do street photography, you often go to like the same places. So one of mine would be to take this one bus that did like a whole round around the city. This one here, I was sitting on a bench after a long day of trying to find photographs. I was quite tired, and so I sit down and you're always kind of paying attention at the edges, and so I noticed these two circles, but there wasn't quite something there. But I had it in the back of my mind, and then this little dog came in, and obviously his tail is like perfectly round as well. So I took one picture, I got up so I could go a little bit above, took 3 pictures total, and that was it. But I think it's interesting, and I haven't practiced street photography in a little while now, but when you do it regularly, you walk around and your brain kind of spots like this person in red and this and that, and then you kind of piece them together as you walk, so that when a photo materializes, you've already like have kind of all the elements in your head. I'll grab a little bit of water. By the way, I didn't necessarily mean this show to be like seen like in a linear way like that, but I'm not going to have you move your chairs like all over the place. So let's just go in that order. So this image I took during COVID. So I was still in Chile when I did 3 strict lockdowns because I did all the wrong seasons. So I did a winter in Chile, then I went back to France. It was winter, I did another lockdown. Went back to Chile, it was winter again, I did another lockdown. Got very, very lucky. So I have like 3 COVID projects, essentially. But this one was during, like, at the beginning of COVID when, everybody was like really, really freaked out. So at first we weren't allowed to go out at all, and then we started to be allowed to go for like a little sanity walk in the neighborhood. And so I walked around and I saw this church, and there was the priest outside. And by that point, he really wasn't allowed to open, but I remember clearly that we weren't allowed to gather, but his church was open. And so he saw me with a camera and he gestured me to come. So we chatted a little bit. And he said, well, if you like photography, I have a great view of Valparaíso, if you wanna see like in the courtyard. And so I said yes. I wasn't terribly interested in the view because I'm not very interested in kind of postcardy images. But if somebody invites you in, I followed my curiosity there. So he takes me to the courtyard, which is his living quarters. And the view is great, but I'm not super interested in the view. But he leaves me there and he says, you can stay as long as you want and you can photograph anything you want. And his clothes were drying. So I just stayed half an hour and photographed his clothes drying, which I don't think is what he expected. But yeah, I mean, I love the light coming in through the shirts. That metal cross, which is meant for people to see from below the hill, was really interesting. So it's again an image that's very graphic, that's very much about light, form, but there's also this mix of the sacred and the, I'm forgetting my English words, profane. Same, okay. Something of the sacred and the profane. Or mundane. Thank you. It's embarrassing when I forget my English words because I sound like American. So people are like, why? That's fine. Yeah. This I call my accidental homage to Sergio Larraín, do people know his work? So he's an acclaimed Chilean photographer. He passed away. He was part of Magnum for a while. He did a body of work on Valparaíso, a wonderful, wonderful book. And then eventually he kind of retired from photography, went in the Chilean desert up in the north to meditate and write. And well, we found out later he was still occasionally going to Valparaíso and photographing, but there was this whole tale around him becoming a hermit and getting kind of lost in the desert. So if you don't know his work, I do encourage you to go have a look because it's really extraordinary. And he photographed Valparaíso for decades, and I was aware of his work. I had actually seen an exhibition of his at the Cartier-Bresson Foundation in Paris with my sister, I think maybe 15 years ago, like years before any of us thought we'd live in Chile one day. And we were kind of fantasizing about living in Valparaíso, and eventually we did both live there, so it's a nice kind of coincidence. But yeah, so I was aware of Sergio Larraín. I actively did not look at the book while I was at the beginning of making that work because I didn't want to feel any weight of it or not take images that I wanted to take. I didn't want that weight. So I was aware of the work, but I just went and photographed on my own. And then I think 3 years in, I went back to the book and looked at it and was kind of amazed to see, obviously Valparaíso has changed. He's photographed it from early 50s to all the way to the 90s. A lot of that work is in the 60s. So Valparaíso has changed, but there's a lot in what he photographed that I still found, and in the way that he photographs as well that I was I'm not, I don't want to say reproducing because I wasn't trying to imitate, but I found some, coincidences there. And this is one of them. I took this image and then I was like, oh, this looks very Sergio Lorraine. So I went back home, I flipped through a book and I saw one that's like, it was very similar. Not the same staircase, but quite similar. So this staircase, I tried to photograph it for years. Essentially, I saw it on one of my first outings in Valparaíso, and I thought it was really cool. You can't see it, but on the other side, there's like a big like metal sign that I thought was really amazing. But I didn't know the city. It was nighttime. I was a little bit tipsy. So I liked that staircase, but then I could never find it because, as I mentioned, Valparaíso is a bit of a labyrinth, and I wasn't familiar with the neighborhood at all. And then 3 years later, I moved 2 minutes away from it. So I was like, oh, that's where it is. Okay. And so I kept going back until I finally found a picture there. And this is, again, during COVID, because it was so close to my home. It was one of the places where I could go, and that was allowed. And the image, I've been working on a book dummy. And so the image on the left, there's quite a few images that I found again when I was going through that process of editing for a book that weren't in my initial show about Valparaíso, because I found them. I had completely forgotten about them or wasn't interested in them at the time, but there's quite a few images that I've picked out afterwards. And this one is one of them, and I did like it as a pendant to that one. So they both like really reinforce the kind of graphic quality of one another. This one, it looks like a double exposure, but it isn't. It's just kind of a complicated view of reflections, and there's a glass and there's something behind it and there's something reflected. So again, I like this kind of maze of shapes and you don't really know what you're looking at. I also like the mix of kind of the natural and the urban here. So I am drawn to these sort of complicated images as well. I'm not sure if I'll do all of them, but let me, this one is, this one I took at a circus, like very high up in the hills. And I have a friend in Valparaíso who's been making portraits of circus artists for years and years. And so he took me one time when he was shooting. And whenever there's something interesting going on, whether it's like, I don't know, a protest, a parade, an event, I always look the other way. I'm never too interested in crowds, and when there's too much going on, I don't really know what to look for. So I tend also to kind of pick out these quieter scenes, these quieter moments, or if I'm in a place where there's a lot going on, I'll kind of veer off and look for something a little bit more quiet. So this is one example of that. He was photographing the circus artists, and I just walked on the other side of a tent and I found these two dogs playing. I like to imagine that they're sharing a little secret. But yeah, I mean, it's a sweet moment. There's a lot of playfulness in that work as well. You know, I described it in fairly serious terms so far, but it's also light and playful. And this is also an image that I thought I missed at the time. Like I saw it and I had a different image in my head of what I wanted. So when I saw it, I thought it wasn't very good. And then a few months later, I looked at it and picked it out of the archives. And that's a picture that people like a lot as well. It's cute. Yeah, I have a lot of animals in those photos. That's also a question I get. So if you know some work that's coming out of Valparaíso over Sergio Lorraine, There's also Peterson did a book on Valparaíso. Garcia Alix did a book on Valparaíso. They were both invited at a photography festival. And sort of, there are a lot of stray dogs in Valparaíso, which is one of the reasons why they end up in my pictures a lot. Stray dogs, stray cats, but there's kind of a cast of characters that you'll see in all these bodies of work around Valparaíso. So the stray dogs are one. You'll find some sailors, and you'll find a lot of pelicans. So I think I've hit all the character marks on that one. This is a little bit of an echo to the one that I showed at the beginning. Again, for this idea of kind of a something that's a maze that's a little bit complicated to make out, lots of lights and shadows, and obviously there's like a little hand for the human presence. Yeah. Just walking out my door to go buy eggs or something. So this one is the oldest one in this series. I'm checking. Yeah. This is one of the first one that I made in Valparaíso. And I waited a fair amount of time to get that one, partially because I had a different idea for what I wanted the image to look at. But essentially, there's like 3 positive spaces and 2 negative spaces. So it was clear that it was a frame for something to happen. And then it's just a little bit of a waiting game. So my initial idea is that there would be like 3 different things happening in all of these positive spaces, and they would all magically talk to one another, and it would be extraordinary. And that never happened because it was very quiet. There weren't a lot of people. So I waited. I photographed different kind of passersby in different places, but the image didn't really work. And then these 2 men came out carrying a ladder, and that just completed the photo really nicely with that triangular shape echoing these triangles. So visually it really works, and I think about that a lot because a lot of street photography is a little bit about waiting game. Sometimes you find a moment and you photograph that, and then it's gone, and other times you find kind of a setting, a background, and you feel like something is going to happen, but you have to like wait it out and be patient about it. So this is one of these images, but what often happens when you photograph in that way is that this is what the image ends up looking like. Like you can really kind of see the strings being pulled, and you know that the photographer waited for somebody to be in that spot, and it could kind of be anybody. So what I like about this image is that they work visually with the frame, but also they work there, so they kind of belong to the building, and I think that also completes the image, not only from a visual standpoint, but from a, I don't want to say philosophical because it's too much, but I can't find the word. Yeah, they just really belong there, and I think that's what makes this image stick more than just having a random person here. This one I took, these are lifeguards. So I got invited to a memorial for the lifeguards. So it's kind of a 2-step ceremony. First, they like go at sea and they pay homage to people who've fallen, throw some water at sea, and then they go visit the cemetery. So I was invited by the photographer of the event to come and kind of shoot along. And yeah, immediately I tried to find a vantage point from above so that I could get these really kind of graphic, the graphic quality of the scene between the shadows and these round hats. And I have quite a few images that are from like a vantage point from above. Part of it is kind of landscape is in Valparaíso helps like photograph from above or from below because it's very steep. But it also helps bring different elements together or disorient the viewer a little bit, and again bring out this like more geometric quality to a scene. So I look for these very intentionally. This is kind of my only horizon. When I did my very first edit of Valparaíso and I started showing it to people, maybe like a few months in, somebody was like, well, isn't it like a seaport? Because there's no image of the water. There's no image of a sea. Because I had this image at the beginning I photographed quite early on. And from then on, I really wanted to find images that were like that were really, again, disorienting, that didn't leave a lot of breathing room. So I was looking for images like that, and in the meantime, I had forgotten about other aspects of the city. But I did lean into that, the kind of almost claustrophobic quality of the images in the city at times. And so even though that's like a horizon, it's quite obstructed as well. This is one of the images that I, again, pulled out quite recently. And I like this staircase going into the water directly. It feels like an odd moment, a little bit surreal, a little bit unexpected. So again, you get to see the ocean, but in a way that you might not have been expecting. Yeah. I have different stages of this like poster that's in the street, and it's I've been back 2 years after I took this one, and it's like now very decrepit. So I have different instances of the figure of Christ just like melting into the wall. But again, I'm interested in the shape here, and there's a lot of a nice detail from the wood panel behind. So this one I took at the fish market, which was again one of my very regular spots in Valparaíso. I would go probably once a week. And so this was a morning where it was really late. Normally I'd go when it's like busy and bustling and there's a lot going on. And that morning I was quite late, so I almost didn't go. And then I figured, I'm up. I don't have anything better to do, so I'll just go check it out anyway. So I did arrive at a time where the market was closing down. The fishermen was closing out their stands. But it gave me a very different view of a fish market, something that was quieter. And so I got to photograph this fisherman who's washing off. I have a few images of him. So this one I didn't ask for permission. I just snapped before the moment disappeared. And then I got a little closer and then I asked him for permission. But this one is the one that I preferred from the lot because of the composition is interesting, and he is washing off, but his gesture is a little bit, it could be interpreted in different ways. And so I like that way you can kind of project a little bit into that scene. He's just washing off, but he could seem stressed or something. Like you can kind of invent a little bit of a story there. And yeah, you can see some of my recurring themes. I have a lot of clothes drying as well. So if I search my Lightroom catalog for keywords and clothes, I'll find like a bunch. And that's something that's quite useful when you go out and you photograph daily or almost daily, is to have these little themes that you look for. Not necessarily to make something out of it, but just to kind of keep you engaged when you're having a bad day and you're not really getting anything. But, here's like clothes, or I have like a whole Coca-Cola signs, and it just keeps you moving to the next image. So I have that. I have endless pelican images. I even have a subcategories of pelicans eating fish heads, because I have so many. So this is one of those. Here I like the order and the disorder, because all those pelicans are perfectly aligned, trying to grab that fish head first. So in photographing at a fish market, people would start kind of recognizing me and trying to make sure I had a good time and a good photo. So the fishermen just started throwing fish heads so that the pelicans would do something for me. Either like really high up or like once like right at my feet, so they like all came swirling, which made it for a good photo, but it was a bit jarring. So yeah, quite a few versions of the pelicans. They're quite massive. I hadn't really realized until I went there that they're really giant. Yeah. I will say, I come from that school where you compose in camera and you rarely crop, if at all. So I rarely crop. Sometimes I crop a little bit. This one I cropped a lot. It was a vertical initially. And a friend of mine, Julia Bayer, who's in our collective, she suggested that I try to make it a horizontal, and it worked really nicely. So yeah, thanks to her. So as you know, as I've mentioned, a lot of these images are very kind of quiet. There's like one subject. This one, on the other hand, is very lively. There's like all these dogs running around, running after the truck. You can't hear the sound, but like it's gas delivery, so they're like knocking on the gas, so like everybody knows that they're coming. So this is a very lively scene, and like all the dogs, their shadows like look like little arrows pointing, so it adds a lot of movement to the scene. And again, I'm photographing from above, looking down. This image I took in a neighborhood where I was told not to go. When I moved to Valparaíso and I started photographing there, everybody kept telling me that it was really dangerous. And so out of the 42 hills of Valparaíso, I was told I could go to 2 on my own. So I was like, well, I'm not going to photograph just like the 2 hills. I want to know what else is happening. So I got a fixer, which is quite unusual for street photography, but I didn't speak Spanish, I didn't know the city, and everybody kept warning me. Like, even if I took out my camera, random people would come and were like, you have to hide it, you can't do that. So I met this guy who was, an English teacher, so we could communicate, and he had a car and some free time, so he became my fixer for like a couple months, and he would drive me around. Like, we did kind of like hill by hill until I like knew a lot of places. And so for that one, he's actually with me. So this is one of my forbidden neighborhoods. Eventually, as I got to know the city, as I moved in a different neighborhood as well, as I spoke Spanish, I obviously went out on my own, and nothing has ever happened to me. So I never, I think people were also trying to be very protective of me as like a foreigner, as a woman walking around. But yeah, there are still places where I would go with someone like a photographer friend, but I did manage to do this whole body of work and only had very positive experiences. So, yeah.
Why are the dogs so fascinated with what's going on? Why are they following that truck around with its gas deliveries?
It's just, they run after cars a lot.
Just regardless?
Yeah, just regardless of the gas. No, not at all. No, like the stray dogs, they like kind of sometimes form pack and they like run after cars. Yeah. So like any kind of car. I would avoid like a pack of stray dogs because like I wasn't like too reassured. Like 1 or 2, it's fine. But and then so this one, he was a painter in one of the like more touristy neighborhoods. And what I like about this image is it's literally a postcard, but because of like the angle, how close I am, it becomes really, really abstract. And then there's like a lot of nice little details, like the shadow lining up perfectly with his sleeve. And I tried again a few different angles photographing him, and in the end I chose this one where you can't see him, but you have his hand, you have a postcard, and it creates, once again, a little bit of a confusion. But I tried really hard not to take postcardy images of the city, and so this one I like because it is the one postcard. yeah, I think that's it. Do you have any questions, any comments on some of the images? Anything you'd like to know that I haven't mentioned? Yeah, it is a quiet group.
What are you working on now?
I am working on something very different. So after this body of work, I turned to cyanotypes, and so I have a whole series it's a mix of, it's called Blue Lingers in Silence. It's a mix of self-portraits, landscapes, still lifes. And I started this series in one of the confinements of COVID. I had met a photographer who taught me how to do cyanotypes, and I felt like we're gonna get locked up again. So I just figured I need something to do for my own sanity. So I ordered all the equipment, and then I received it in like the day after lockdown. So I started making them kind of because I was interested in the technique. I wanted to learn and to kind of pass the time. And I didn't want to print my street photography because it didn't make sense. So I did a little bit to learn the technique, and then I figured like these images don't really make sense as cyanotypes. There's no reason to do it. So I started going through my archive, looking for images that I thought would be more suitable to what I wanted to do. I started making self-portraits, which I had never done before. And so little by little, kind of organically, this series was born. And I really wanted to find that kind of time and space that I had when I was in the darkroom. This is all digital work, but I started in the darkroom, and I loved like spending a whole day with chemicals, and you don't know what time it is, and you're like completely in your world. It's very tactile. You have a magic of the image appearing. So I was looking for something like that. And cyanotype is kind of a low cost, low equipment way to find that. And so, yeah, and I haven't done street photography in a little while now, but I'm still very interested in photographing kind of the daily, whether it's outside or indoors. I'm still interested in a lot of the same things that I'm interested in here, which is light and shadow and mystery and finding kind of a poetic quality to mundane things. So that is still true of the cyanotypes. And what I like about it, obviously all of this is taking in Valparaíso over this period of time where I live there. And in the cyanotypes, I allowed myself to do things that I never would in a series like this. Which is like double exposures and mixing images from different time and place, because that every series is really about creating an atmosphere that is really dreamlike, so it doesn't quite matter where the images are from. And so I found that really liberating to be able to work anywhere and mix things together and kind of open a different side of my imagination in a way. So this is what I'm doing now, and I have other ideas that are more in the alternative process vein. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, wait, where's the question? We can talk later. We can talk later too.
Well, I was just wondering about my favorite one over there.
Yeah.
It ends up being, because of the way that it's sort of melting away, it ends up being very sort of gender fluid, right?
That's true. Yeah.
And more sexual than sanctified, which I think is really interesting. Was that something intentional, or did you notice that as you were watching it sort of develop through?
Not quite. I mean, the way the figure is standing, when you remove it from the context and religious context, there is something that's a bit like sensual there. But no, I hadn't thought about it as much as you have, so thank you for that. Yeah, it is true. There is a lot of that. Yeah, thank you for that comment. I'll look at it differently now.
You're like, now I can't look at it.
Now I can look at it the same. All righty.
All right, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here.